fear failure, being alone, rejection, change, criticism? I believe our biggest fear is the fear of failure because we're afraid that if we fail, rejection, change, being alone, and criticism could follow. Hello, and welcome to Pathlights Studio. My name is Carol Hunsberger, and this is the 9th episode in our series, Unlocking Purpose through Communication, Faith, and Confidence. In a previous episode, I talked about the importance of surrounding ourselves with honest people, people who we know have our back and want the best for us, people who are traveling this life with us, and they make our life so much richer. But in this episode, I want to talk about that fear of failure and giving yourself permission to take risk no matter the consequences, because they will impart lessons that we need to learn for our journey. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. Risk is stepping into the unknown, facing uncertainty, and overcoming fear in order to overcome something greater. It often requires faith and courage and action despite possible failures. Risk isn't about extreme adventures or business ventures. It's about making a decision to step outside our comfort zone, whether they're in relationships, our careers, faith, or ministry. Success often follows perseverance and risk-taking. Wayne Gretzky, that famous hockey player, once said, "We miss 100% of the shots we don't take." Many people give up when they are on the verge of success. In 2014, I was awarded a faculty development leave in which I stepped outside that classroom for a year and traveled around the world interviewing the great risk takers and dream makers. From clergy to educators to philanthropists to oceanographers to marine biologists to treasure hunters, I wanted to know how they had the courage to undertake the risk that they took, and if they felt that some of those risks were worth the rewards. People like Greg Scommel. You might recognize Greg if you ever were to watch Discovery Channel's Shark Week. Greg is that marine biologist tagging great white sharks off the coast of Massachusetts. I asked Greg what was one of the earliest lessons that he learned about taking risk, and his answer was, do the hard. And he told me a story of when he finished his master's degree and wanted to study his PhD, that he had two offers. One, a college in London where he could study coral reefs, full ride, stipend, a job, housing, everything. Or he could stay in Boston, go to Boston University, and work part-time in the shark lab. He said, when it came down to it, I chose the sharks because that's where I wanted to end up. And he said, even though it wasn't as cush as perhaps London would be, and I had to work a lot harder and make a lot more sacrifices to fulfill my dream, he said it was worth every minute. He said, when faced with a decision, one that leads somewhere nice, but one that takes you to your passion and purpose, he said, do the hard. The next person that I interviewed was in my own backyard. She was the chancellor at Tarrant County College, Irma Hadley Johnson. And Irma told me the story of a time when she was running for a political race. Everybody told her that she was going to win this election. And she said, and I lost. And I didn't lose by a little bit. I lost by a landslide. She said, I was so upset. I took to my bed and I wallowed in self-pity for 24 hours. She said, finally, I said to myself, Irma, get up, put your big girl panties on. We have work to do and people to serve. I was able to interview the daughter of the famed treasure hunter, Mel Fisher. I had the privilege of meeting Mel Fisher in 1980 when he was searching for treasure off of Florida's Treasure Coast. He was 100 yards away from my lifeguard stand. He was optimistic and passionate and compassionate. It took Mel 16 years to discover the Etosha, a ship that wrecked in 1622. When he discovered this ship in 1985, he discovered the mother lode, $450 million worth of sunken treasure. As I said previously, Mel died before I had the chance to interview him. So I interviewed his daughter, Taffy. And I asked her, I said, Taffy, was he really that optimistic? And she said, absolutely. He firmly believed today's the day. Every time he got into that boat to go diving for treasure, he truly believed that today was the day he was going to discover it. And the last person is Jean-Michel Cousteau, son of Jacques Cousteau. I was able to interview Jean-Michel Cousteau on the back of a cruise ship overlooking the Bora Bora Mountains. And he enthralled me with his diving stories, with his love of the ocean, and trying to find water for all people of the earth, clean water for people to drink. At the end of the interview, I asked him, I said, Jean-Michel, is there a question you wished I would have asked? And he said, yes, I wish you would have asked, what can I do for you? And I thought he was talking about, I should have asked him what I could do for him. He goes, no, you misunderstand. I wish you would have said, Jean-Michel, would you do this for me? And I thought about that all of these leaders that I had interviewed, they all had this one thing in common. It's this idea of servant leadership, to take the risk for the better good of people, to serve all people. Now, we have known our biblical heroes of the Bible, right? Noah, who built the ark before there was rain. Abraham, who left his homeland in search of God. Moses, who took the Hebrews out of Egypt, searching for that promised land. Peter, who walked on water during a storm. And the disciples and the early Christians, who risked their lives and often lost their lives to spread the good news. But being a risk taker isn't an ancient phenomenon. We have modern day saints and martyrs. Look at St. Maximilian Kolbe, who was harboring Jews when he was arrested by the Nazis and taken to Auschwitz concentration camp. It was there that he volunteered to take the place of a man who had been condemned to die. St. Oscar Romero was murdered for defending the poor. And St. Teresa of Calcutta left the safety and comfort of her convent in Ireland to travel to India to work in the streets of Calcutta, serving the poorest of the poor. She's often quoted as saying, it was a call within a call. But we have risk takers and great dreamers and those who live among us. Take, for example, my own deacon, Deacon Eric. As an ordained deacon, he feels that it is his duty to shepherd souls and not sit on the sidelines. He will not remain silent when the salvation of souls is at stake. He will often say in his homily, woe to me, Deacon Eric, if I lead my sheep astray. When he spoke out against Amendment 4, which allowed for the unrestricted death of the unborn, he knew it was a risk, but remaining silent would be the greater risk. He reminded the congregation in his homily, for a Catholic, all rights begin with life. Abortion does not only kill the body, it wounds the soul of both the mother and child. And God's commandment is clear: thou shalt not kill. As Christians, we must defend the most vulnerable. Well, apparently, his words struck a chord, because after the homily, when he sat down, a man stood up and said that reproductive rights was a political issue, not a moral issue, and did not need to be discussed in church, everyone was silent. We've never heard someone stand up after a homily and argue with the deacon or the priest. Well, the next day, Eric served at 2 masses. He gave this homily 2 more times, and this same man came back twice. At the end of the homily, he stood up and said that reproductive rights was a political issue, not a moral issue. But this time, the church was not silent. Parishioner after parishioner stood up and defended life, because the truth is never meant to be silenced. I was so proud of my husband for taking that risk, for speaking the truth and protecting his flock. That's what it means to be a shepherd. I stand with Eric in recognizing our responsibility to not be silent and to defend life. Now, some may disagree, some may unsubscribe and not want to listen to my message anymore, and that's okay, because I believe at the end of my life, I'm not going to answer to social media. I'm not going to answer to my critics, but I am going to answer to Jesus Christ, and he is going to ask me, did you love others as I love you? Did you lay down your life for your friends? And did you stand for my truth? I want my answer to be yes. John chapter 15, verse 13 tells us, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend. Serving God is risky. Being a Christian today involves risk. Some may call us naive, unintelligent, misguided, but Jesus reminds us in Matthew chapter 16, verse 25, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. When I look back on Eric and the martyrs, the modern day martyrs and saints, when I look back at the heroes of the Bible and the early Christians and the disciples, and I look back on the dreamers that I studied in 2014, they had 4 things in common. Number 1, they had a deep prayer life. They spent a lot of time on their knees in conversation with God, not just talking to God, but listening to God, allowing him to direct their footsteps. Secondly, they had a strong relationship with God and Christ. They knew their Savior. They know their God, and they know that their God has work for them to do and would never lead them astray. They understood their purpose. They knew what they were seeking. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. And lastly, they had no doubt in the mission, no doubt in what they were pursuing, no doubt that the risk was worth the reward. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, for we live by faith and not by sight. So we're probably not called to do great things, and our risks are going to be relatively small when compared to some of these other folks, but they're still risky for us. We still have to step out in faith. Well, what are some things that we can do to make these risks a little more calculated? Well, first of all, we need to pray for guidance. We need to be on our knees. We need to be asking for guidance. I don't know about you, but in my prayer time, I often find myself telling God how it needs to work instead of truly listening. But when I get quiet and when I listen, that's when I feel God talking to my soul. The second thing we need to do is we need to prepare and to plan. I'm not suggesting that you wake up one morning and you go out on this grand adventure. No, there are steps that we need to take. While faith is essential, preparation is the foundation for success. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. The heart of the man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. The third one is the one I think that's probably one of the most important. Start small. take little risk. And when you get confidence, then you'll take bigger risk. And when you get more confidence, you'll take even bigger risk. The Lord sets before us ways to achieve our goals, ways to discover our dreams, ways to engage our purpose. Martin Luther King said, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Start small. This Pathlights ministry, this journey to YouTube started in 2006 with my attendance at an Acts retreat. From there, I was on the Acts team. From there, I co-directed a couple retreats. And then in 2011, I started my own ministry with the Dream Evader retreats in St. Croix. Then I went on a faculty development leave for a year. From there, I joined with Beth Payton, and we started doing smaller retreats, weekend retreats in living rooms all around the country. And then I thought my journey with Pathlights was over because we moved from Texas to Florida. And then God was knocking on my heart again. And then we got Tammy Metzler. And between the three of us, we were doing retreats in Fort Pierce, in Denton, Texas, and St. Louis. And now we feel like we need a bigger audience. And so now I'm making these YouTube videos. In every one of these endeavors, these small steps, I learned something. From the Acts retreat, I learned that sisterhood is precious. From being on team, I learned about serving others and what a grace that can be. From doing my Dream Evader retreat, I learned about what it was like when we answer God's call. When I did the faculty development leave and I talked about to these great dreamers all around the world, I learned from them about taking these risks and that it's going to be okay. I learned about doing the hard, putting on my big girl panties. I learned about today's the day, and I learned about what can I do for you. Now I'm doing these YouTube videos. If you would have told me in 2006 that 20 years later I'd be sending this message in a video format, I would have said, I don't have the courage. I don't have the know-how. But God knew my purpose. He knew where he was leading my footsteps. The fourth thing that we can do to take these calculated risks is allow ourselves to fail. Allow ourselves to look for the lesson. Nicole Curtis on the DIY Rehab Addict says that mistakes are just knowledge waiting to happen. Sometimes failure is just a redirection. What other people may look as failures, we need to look at lessons. Okay, Lord, what was I supposed to learn here? What did you want me to gain? What knowledge that you're going to put to good use later on? Because remember, God's timing is perfect. 5, surround yourself with positive, honest people. Because we know that honest people, they're not going to allow you to get in over your head. They're going to help guide those steps as well. 6 is something I learned when I was 18 years old. Replace the what if with even if. Well, what if I fail? Well, what if people judge me? Well, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, what if I spend all this work making these YouTube videos and nobody watches and they make or leave hateful comments? What I want you to think about doing, change that mindset. The what if, here's the fear, replace it with even if, and here's the lesson. What if I fail? Even if I fail, I will learn. Well, what if I struggle and I can't do it? Even if I struggle, God will strengthen me. Well, what if I do these videos and no one watches? Even if no one watches, my children will have a lasting legacy of their mother. Oh, what I would give to hear my mom's voice or see her one more time. As Joshua chapter 1, verse 9 says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And the last one, number 7, we need for our calculated risk to step out in faith. At some point, action is required. Trust that God is preparing you. My husband says, Sometimes you just have to shoot the engineer and start the project. Get off the couch. You are not going to be pursuing your purpose if you're constantly sitting on the couch, scrolling up. Sir Isaac Newton says that objects in motion tend to stay in motion, while objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Step outside your comfort zone. I believe that's where the action is, and that's where life gets fun. Make a decision today. Are you going to stay stuck in fear for playing the what ifs of missed opportunities? Or are you going to step into faith, knowing that God will prepare you along the way? So, stepping stone challenge for this episode. It's all about replacing the what ifs with the even ifs. I want you to take a moment and figure out what fear is stopping you from doing, right? How has it hijacked your purpose? And write out, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I decide to join the choir and I don't make it? What if I decide to start a children's ministry and nobody joins? What if I decide to be a lector and I stumble over the words? What if I decide to start a ministry and I can't figure out how it's supposed to work? So write all those down. Now I want you to replace it with the even if. Even if I try out for the choir and don't make it, I'll still be singing every week at church. Even if I start a children's ministry and no one comes, I'm going to work with the few children that do come. Even if I start this ministry and not many people watch, I have lessons that I need to be learning. So, a few final thoughts. Taking a risk is frightening, but we need to have that courage to step out in faith. So, what is God calling you to risk today? Speaking the truth? To stand for what you believe in? Let's be bold. Let's take the risk and let's trust God that He knows what He's doing and where He's leading us. And may your light shine so bright that others are drawn to follow. Be that beacon of hope that leads others to their path. And as always, may God continue to bless you as you step into His purpose for your life. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.